When Trump said, "That's okay with me," it sounded like a casual comment. But it wasn't. Those 4 words set off a chain reaction that could hit Russia harder than anything the U.S. has tried so far. Behind that simple phrase is a bill that's been waiting quietly in the background. A proposal packed with penalties so extreme they could shake up entire markets and cut deep into the cash fueling Putin's war. What makes this moment wild is how subtle it was. No big announcement, no dramatic speech, just a quick response that opened the door for one of the toughest economic moves the U.S. has ever considered. And once that door opened, the whole situation shifted. Countries that rely on Russian energy suddenly had something new to worry about. Because if this bill moves forward, it won't just affect Russia. The bill at the center of all this is called the Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025, and it's a lot more intense than it sounds. It was originally pushed by Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. But for months it just sat there, waiting for the right moment. Now that Trump has signaled he's open to it, the whole thing has snapped back into the spotlight. At its core, the bill gives the U.S. a new kind of pressure tool: massive secondary sanctions. Instead of punishing Russia directly, it targets any country that keeps buying Russian oil, gas, or uranium. And the penalties can climb as high as a 500% tariff. That's the kind of hit that makes governments rethink their entire energy strategy overnight. It's a bold move, and if it actually becomes law, it could reshape how nations deal with Russia. But to understand how heavy this really is, you need to know how these secondary sanctions actually work. Here's Section 3, smooth, natural, fast-paced, right around 50 seconds. Rewind. Section 3, 50-second script, natural and smooth. Secondary sanctions might sound complicated, but the idea is simple. Instead of going after Russia directly, the U.S. goes after the countries that do business with Russia. It's pressure through the back door. If a nation keeps buying Russian oil, for example, the U.S. can hit that country with a massive tariff until the deal just isn't worth it anymore. Think of it like this. If buying Russian energy suddenly costs 5 times more because of U.S. penalties, most governments won't think twice. They'll just switch suppliers. And when those buyers disappear, Russia loses billions almost overnight. That's the whole strategy. Make it so painful for Russia's partners that they walk away on their own. It's a clever tactic, but it only works if the punishment is strong enough to scare off big players. And that's exactly why this bill is built like a hammer. Because the U.S. knows some countries won't back down easily. What makes this bill even more intense is the politics behind it. For months, Congress was basically sitting on it, waiting for the moment when Trump would finally show his hand. And once he dropped those 4 words, everything shifted. Suddenly, a proposal that had been gathering dust now had momentum, and with more than 80 senators already supporting it, that momentum is huge. Graham and Blumenthal, the senators who wrote it, have been pushing this idea since early in the year, hoping it would become the leverage the U.S. needs to pull Russia back to the table. But without Trump's support, no one wanted to take the first step. Now, with Trump signaling he's open to the idea, lawmakers are acting like they've been waiting for this green light the whole time. But here's where things get tricky. If this bill moves forward, it won't only squeeze Russia, it could put serious pressure on countries the U.S. actually calls allies. Here's where the whole plan gets messy. A lot of America's closest allies are still buying Russian energy. Countries like Japan, South Korea, Turkey, and even members of the EU rely on Russian oil and gas more than most people realize. In fact, the EU alone has spent billions on Russian energy this year, even while supporting Ukraine at the same time. It's a strange mix, helping Ukraine while still paying Russia. If the U.S. actually hits buyers with a 500% tariff, those allies could get caught in the crossfire. Their energy costs would spike, their economies would wobble, and Washington might suddenly find itself punishing partners it needs on its side. Some nations might ask for exemptions, others might push back, and a few could even start looking for ways around the rules. And that's the big question hanging in the air. If the fallout hits friendly countries this hard, will the plan even work the way the U.S. hopes? On paper, a move like this sounds unstoppable. Cut off Russia's customers, drain Russia's money, and force Putin back to the table. But in reality, it's a lot more complicated. Secondary sanctions have been used before, and they don't always hit the way people expect. Some countries are rich enough to absorb the cost. Others find loopholes, rerouting shipments through friendly nations or creating quiet, back-channel deals that avoid the penalties entirely. And then there's the simple truth. Some governments aren't willing to walk away from cheap Russian oil, even if it means taking a financial punch. Big buyers like China or India have enough economic muscle to push back, slow walk changes, or build new systems that get around U.S. pressure altogether. That's why a 500% tariff exists in the first place. It's meant to be so overwhelming that even the strongest economies have to pause and rethink their strategy. But whether it's strong enough to actually change behavior, that's still up in the air. And meanwhile, Moscow isn't sitting quietly waiting to find out. Russia didn't take long to fire back. Before the bill even picked up steam, voices close to the Kremlin were already blasting the idea, calling it proof that the U.S. isn't interested in peace at all. Figures like Dmitry Medvedev rushed out angry statements, framing the sanctions as a direct attack on Russia itself. And that reaction tells you a lot. Because when Moscow starts shouting this early, it usually means they're worried about what comes next. But the danger isn't just in the words. If these penalties move forward, Russia could push back in ways that stretch far beyond the energy market. It could tighten its ties with China, ramp up its propaganda campaigns, or even look for ways to retaliate economically. And when big countries start feeling cornered, they tend to respond in unpredictable ways, which leads to the final question everyone's watching now. What actually happens next? Right now, everything hinges on what happens inside Congress. The bill still has to clear committees, survive debates, get 2 separate votes, and make its way to Trump's desk. And even then, nothing is guaranteed. Trump might fully approve it, or he might use the threat alone to squeeze Putin without ever signing anything. That uncertainty is part of the strategy, keeping Russia guessing while the pressure slowly builds. What we do know is that if this bill becomes law, the global energy map will change almost instantly. Countries will scramble to adjust, markets will shift, and Russia's cash flow could take a hit it's never experienced before. Whether that forces Putin to finally talk peace, or pushes him even deeper into confrontation, is the part no one can predict. One thing's clear: the next few months are going to shape the direction of the entire conflict. And once this bill moves, there's no going back.